Hi there, I'm Dustin Warncke. Welcome to this segment where we're going to talk about the Mosin Nagant and the Jmeck scope mount and installing the Jmeck scope mount as a mounting option for a scope on the Mosin. So I'm really excited about this because I've had a few Mosin videos that have been rolling around YouTube for a while. I've got more hits than I ever imagined on the big video that I did on the Mosin Nagant that's about, I don't know, 27 minutes long or so. And somebody said, hey, why do you still have scout mounts? Why don't you check out a Jmeck mount? And I said, I've never heard of a Jmeck mount. And when I found it, it was just like finding the Holy Grail because I've been waiting for a mount to come along that was the best of both worlds that existed before, and I'll explain what I mean. Those of you that are new to the Mosin Nagant, we'll talk about what's been available in the past. Forever you've had the scout mount that replaces the rear sight or the entire rear assembly and uses the dovetail rail of the rear sight. And that pretty much gives you the option of having a pistol scope or another pistol scope or a long eye relief scope. Cannot use a standard eye relief scope in that, but it does mount forward to the receiver. You don't have to bend the bolts, so on and so forth. Then you've always had the standard eye relief scope mounting system, which would be like the ATI bolt system where you would basically drill and tap the receiver, which is going to ruin the collectible value of your firearm and also the historical value of your firearm, but it certainly was a sturdy mount and certainly still is. And I'm not against ATI or S&K or Darrell's or any of the other scout mount or standard receiver mount companies out there. Jmeck met the best of both worlds. He made a no drill, no tap mount that mounted a little bit behind where the rear side is. You could do a scope mount of a standard eye relief, or you could do a scope mount of a long eye relief or pistol scope. And so the nice thing about it is it's the best of both worlds. You're not having to do any major modifications of your firearm, such as drilling or tapping in the receiver, and you can still use a standard scope. And I have been in love with this since I saw it. So I just received mine in the mail. Comes in two pieces like this, and we'll go through how all this works, follow the directions, of course. Jmeck also sends awesome directions along with the mounting instructions and diagrams and everything else. We'll go through that part. And also, I talked to Jeff, who's the owner of Jmeck, and he sent me an email of some ideas that I'd like to share with you of some folks that may have run into issues before, just some tech tips and advice that he has given for utilizing his mounts on the Mosin as you go along and as you do this. And we'll cover that as we install this. Now, so you have two options for mounting with the Jmeck scope mount. You have a choice of a high profile or a low profile mount, and you have your choice of steel or aluminum. Now I opted for a low profile mount just because I like a better cheek weld for my Mosin, and there are pros and cons to each. But I also opted for a aluminum because everything that I've read, aluminum is a very, very strong metal to use, or Jmeck's metal aluminum mounts are very, very strong. Hold up to it, there's no warping, there's no issues there if they're installed correctly. And also, you know, they're a lot lighter than the steel, so that's definitely a good consideration. It was a little bit cheaper as well. And before, again, the past, you know, mounts that you've had for an ATI bolt kit, you're looking at, you know, $40 to $50 for the kit with the handle and everything else, and then you're having to drill and tap or take it to a gunsmith to drill and tap your receiver. For the regular pistol scout mounts, for good ones, you're going to look at, I don't know, paying around $70 for a good Darrell's mount, which will be on the market again soon, I think. And then the S&K mounts, which is the last one that I started using, those are going to cost you about $70. This is about that same price range. But again, you get what you pay for when you buy aftermarket accessories. So make sure that you spend the money up front so you're not sorry later. So that's definitely the case. This is high quality workmanship. I can already tell before I even start installing the parts that I'm going to have a good experience here. So that's definitely a good consideration. Okay, we're going to get into the installation scenario next. One thing I like to use a lot when I do these kind of projects is a rubber mallet like I have here. You can certainly use a block of wood and a rubber mallet, but you never want to use a hammer or anything that's steel on top of steel or on top of wood. You're going to mar the wood, and just not good things happen when you do that. So first thing we'll do is simply depress the barrel bands or the barrel band holders right here. And I'm just going to utilize my mallet there and just knock that one loose. Move over here and do likewise with this one. There we go. And if you haven't, remember to take off your leather sling here, your dog collar sling, if you have the original sling on here. And I forgot to do that, but that's okay, no big deal. Pull that off, pull that out, slide those bands forward, and that's step one. Take our handguard off. Now we're going to set this puppy upside down like this so we can leave the rest of the sling on. We're not going to need to take the rest of that off. And we're going to simply remove this bottom action screw. Got that loose. Now we're going to take out, I like to just take out the bolt completely just to make it a little bit easier to work with. And remove that top screw from the stock right here. Those are your two main action screws that are in the Mosin Nagant. There you go. So your mag well comes out, and now your whole barreled action should come out very easily. Just like that. Today I'm working on a high score rapid fire rest. You can certainly use a workbench or anything else. I just like my high score rest a lot. So we're going to turn this upside down and we're going to start our next step. Two things I really recommend having are a good hex screw or Allen wrench screw set like this, and I have quite a few because I shoot archery and deal with these military guns, and a rubber mallet. Very, very important. So the next thing we're going to do is simply follow the instructions, and it says to keep in mind that there's two different size holes and two different sized ends here. We want to make sure we point them the right direction, and we want to make sure that we center them in between the mag hole right here and the main action screw. So it's going to go right here like this. Now, as the directions say, we want to make sure, and I'll read them directly word for word, place the strap on the receiver between the magazine well and the mounting lug, making sure that the folded end with a larger folded edge and slightly larger diameter holes is facing down. And that's the case here. The larger holes and larger diameter folded edge is facing down, and the smaller diameter holes is going to go on the other side, and that's facing up. We want to center that strap, and we're going to slowly bend that. And we'll try to center that and keep that centered and slowly bend that. And then what I'm going to use is a rubber mallet. This suggests to use a piece of wood and a hammer or a wooden mallet, but the rubber mallet's not going to harm anything, so that's what I'm going to use. Just like that. Now it's very important here that we do not try to pinch or crevice any of the metal here into the actual crevices that we have down here. That could possibly damage the receiver, and you want to make sure you can get as center as possible with this piece. Next, we're going to take the smaller diameter side, the left side, and we're going to fold it 90 degrees. Now I'm going to basically disassemble the actual screws that were on the mount to begin with, and that are going to go on the side on our bent part. Take that off, which is going to be the bottom part of our little screw assembly that's going to be on the bent part, the two screws. And we're going to attach it at first on the straight side, and we'll wrap around and it'll conform to our gun.
Lesson, if you're gonna survive, thank you Smith and Wesson, Lord, I'm still alive, gonna save the game, one predator at a time, got guns and country.
Another option is to put on your cup link around the receiver and slide it on in place after you've got it on. That's kind of what I did just to make this easier to show. So basically I just simply put everything on, bent it around my frame of the receiver, and the metal bends pretty easy, but you want to make sure you do not crease the metal. That's very, very important when you're doing this. And this is a hexagon receiver, so it kind of form fit to that. But I'm just kind of doing this to give an example of what you can do with a round receiver, is just simply get it kind of started around there and then slide it into place like this. Then you want to make sure the whole process that you're checking to make sure this is even with the top of the receiver, and that's very, very important. The main reason why is because you want your scope to sit as center as possible, and it's not necessarily crucial for accuracy, but it certainly is crucial, in my humble opinion, to make sure that this is as center as possible, to make sure that everything lines up correctly. The best way I do this, and it's hard for me to show it at this angle, I look down the barrel to see if the top part of the rail is mounted directly in line with the rear sight of the rifle, or the front side of the rifle. That'll give you a good plane of view of being able to see where you are. Now that we kind of have things started here, you basically are going to have your bent in on this end here, and we just kind of started those here. We're going to start tightening things up a little bit now to conform it to the shape of the rifle. Now, as we go forward, what I wanted to make sure I notated here, because Jmeck had recommended that I did this, was that because of the design of this, the band is simply trapped between the rear lug of the rifle, the rear action screw underneath here, and the actual magazine well here. It's not going to move back and forth. You don't have to worry about that. And there have been tests on many different forums or YouTube. You can go watch several different videos of guys that were going to say the same thing. You're not going to get a lot of side-to-side movement either, because the band has wrapped itself around the actual receiver of the rifle. So the design and the parts, because I've worked with a lot of really garbage parts in the past and garbage aluminum parts, this is so top-notch compared to the other aluminum I worked with in the past, especially the cheap Mosin Nagant, rear sight leaf mounts. Those can get, $20-30, but you certainly get what you pay for there. But the quality and the workmanship and the machining of the Allen screws, the hex screws, as well as the actual mount material that goes around the band and everything is top notch. I put a little bit of Loctite just because I like to use that. I put that on my screws whenever I do a gun project. I do that. I don't know if that's manufacturer recommendation or not, but again, I like to use that whenever I mount a scope or do a scope mount, something like that. Certainly can't hurt it. Make sure you use the kind, I believe this is blue. Yeah, this is blue Loctite. Don't use red, because that can be a problem if you ever need to take it back off, because red locks it for good, and blue is a lot safer and is reversible. So that's something to keep in mind. And also, before I put anything on top of my metal like this, I always like to spray my metal down, or whatever I have my gun apart. I use a product called Q20 Blue. They're a sponsor of the TV show I work with, and you can learn more about them on my own YouTube channel and on my website at dustinsprojects.com. It's an incredible product. It is just like an aerosol can spray, or you can get a spray bottle of it as well. And I just put a little bit on a rag, and it's great. It has replaced all of the gun lubricants that I use because of its properties. I absolutely love to use it. So now we're going to look at the stock, now that we've kind of wiped everything down, have everything installed real well. And this is tight. This is not going anywhere. I've got this part, the top rail part of it, the Picatinny or Weaver rail part of it actually tightened down too, and put a little Loctite on those screws as well. And now we're going to inlet the stock just a little bit. And what I'm going to use is a Dremel tool. Jmeck suggests that you tape off a part, but I'm going to just kind of score off the area that I'm going to modify, and I'll show you that next. Now the area of the stock we're going to actually inlet is this little area here in between the rear action screw and the mag well. Now again, as it's been said in many other videos, any kind of woodworking, the basic rule is to make sure you take off a little bit at a time, especially when you're dealing with a rotary tool like the Dremel tool. It's a whole lot easier to take more off than it is to build it back up later, and that works with working with steel, working with lumber, working with wood, anything like that. If you're in any kind of building, there you go. I've got a sanding band on my Dremel tool, multi-speed Dremel tool. I've not used a Dremel tool on camera before, but here we go. What I'm going to aim to do is basically take out these little notches that are down here. And you can certainly tape off, but I'm familiar enough with this rifle where I know about where to sand. But you can certainly tape off, and that's what the manufacturer suggests, is you tape off the area that you want to actually sand down. So we're going to go and do this. So the one thing we're checking on when it comes to looking to see if we've inletted enough is to hold down the receiver, the rear receiver screw, and the rear sight and pivot back and forth to see if we've done enough. And if there's still a pivot there, then we're going to need to inlet some more. So I've got a little bit more inletting to do here. Now, a couple of other things we're going to talk about real quick when you install this, and this comes directly from an email that I got from Jmeck himself. We want to make sure to use a C-clamp, as we talked about, or a vise, something with padded grips, though, whenever you're using this mount to center it on a round receiver. I did not take off the rail on mine, but that's one suggestion that Jmeck has to make putting the clamp on. The band, that's probably the most difficult part, is forming that to the actual receiver of the rifle. And this receiver action is basically take this top part off and start on the right side and work your way over to the left side, and that's what he suggests as well. But you want to make sure, again, you keep this center, absolutely. One thing when you're tightening things down, make sure you do not tighten things down like you're tightening down the car lug nuts on your truck or tire lug nuts. It's not that hard to just simply you know, get them hand tight enough. Don't strip out anything, especially when you're talking about aluminum. Things can get really messy really quick when you start stripping out screws, and then you've got to drill them out, and it's a big mess. So make sure tight is tight. If the metal starts to bend a little bit, that's tight enough. Stop there. That's very, very important. I'm going to sand off a little bit more. Now every time I take the barrel to put back in the action, I'm going to wipe out my sawdust just so I kind of have a clean area of where I need to work. I'm going to take that action, drop it down in here again. Let's see where we're at. Oh yeah, that's much better. I've got no real play back and forth now, which is really good. And that's what we want to look. Another thing you can always test is my old dollar bill trick, or this isn't my trick, but certainly a lot of guys in the gun community work with this, is free float the rest of your barrel on a Mosin stock, on just a basic Mosin stock. And you can simply take the dollar bill, start at the front end, I'm right off camera here, run that dollar bill all the way up and down. If that's the way you started off with, that's the same way you should be ending with, is not having any major hang-ups on that dollar bill as you go back and forth on your barrel. That's a good way to find out whether or not your barrel is free floated and has any spots. So you can certainly do that before you start sanding, is just see where it's at before you you install the mount. You can certainly run the dollar bill down there, see where it is, and then afterwards run the dollar bill back again to make sure there's no high spots or low spots that are going to affect your accuracy. Okay, let's put the gun back together. So I've reinstalled the main action and rear action screw, which are the two main screws in the gun. Replaced the magazine plate. Don't have any major play issues. Checked out everything, made sure the inletting was correct. And this thing is solid. This thing is rock solid. I'm absolutely amazed. This is better than what I even thought it would be. The one thing that I've got on order that I do not have for this video is going to be a bent bolt. A tip for those of you that are looking for bent bolts, the one thing that I was going to suggest is either get one that's already been bent, or simply send your bolt body off to, you know, there are several people out there that can bend the bolt if you want to keep your serial number and everything intact. But again, I'm always weird about destroying original parts, so what I'm going to do is just order a bolt body that's already been modified and altered, and get that puppy just to replace this part of the bolt body of the actual bolt handle itself, and then leave the rest of it intact. That will also help you with head spacing and other kind of issues like that, instead of replacing an entire bolt. You can also get the fancy little pull rings for your bolt too. I'm just electing to just have a turned down sniper bolt, which is the original sniper style bolt. I don't need to inlet the stock anymore for something like that. If I elected to go with an ATI or any kind of other style of bolt kit or bolt configuration, I would have to inlet the stock a little bit on the side that it comes down. So your mileage varies there, but obviously one thing I cannot do here is utilize the straight pull bolt once I have a scope on here, because there won't be enough clearance to be able to close the bolt with a straight bolt like this as it comes standard. So certainly there's several different bolt conversions sources out there. Check that out. You can even go on eBay and purchase a service or purchase already modified bolts. And so anyway, that's what the end project's going to be like. So we're back. One last section here of our finished product, which is the scope mounted on top of the Jmeck mount. Our gun's reassembled, put it together the same way I took it apart, have the main action screw and the rear action screw in, have the mag plate installed again, and we're ready to go. The main thing that I want to stress here is this is not a hard project, but make sure that you read the directions and make sure you go slowly and watch what you're doing, and certainly watch. There's many other instructional videos of how to install these on the internet. This is just kind of my way, and I was just kind of going through this with the directions along with you to kind of show you my process. A couple of things to keep in mind whenever you're tightening anything down, especially when you're dealing with Allen wrench and hex wrench screws and that kind of stuff. Make sure you don't over tighten. This is not a car. You're not dealing with lug nuts here. Make sure that you just go as snug as you feel by hand. That's snug enough. When the metal over here especially starts to bend, stop. That's going to be snug enough. If you like the extra insurance like I use, certainly use some Loctite. Go with the blue, not the red, so that way it's reversible if you want to take these screws back out of the holes again and not have to drill them out. That's definitely something there too. As I mentioned before, you can use a C-clamp, you can use a hose clamp, any kind of clamp like that. You want to make sure you pad that or buffer that in some way so it does not mar the metal on your rifle. As I did earlier, you can certainly form or start to form your actual mount band that goes underneath the receiver over the mag well, and then tap it with a rubber mallet or some kind of non-marring hammer, either a steel hammer and a piece of wood or whatever you have around, but it's something that's not going to damage the appearance of the rifle like this rubber mallet, and kind of put that in place by that, making sure that it's centered. This is especially crucial for round action receivers, which most of them out there that are going to be using this mount are going to be round action receivers. But the hex receiver is really cool because it kind of, forms it. It's like it's built for this because it forms it and centers it kind of by itself, which is really good. One thing again to make sure that you try is always look down the actual scope mount to the front of the gun and to the rear side of the gun before you put a scope mount on, to make sure it's centered over the receiver. It's not that big of a crucial thing when it comes to actually sighting the gun in, but it certainly, is good to look at something when somebody else looks at your gun or whatever, that you did a good job centering it the best that you could. It's more of an appearance thing than anything else, I guess. And again, my choice here was the 3x9x32. I did that just because I like the low profile mount. I like a better cheek weld. The high profile, you can go up to 40 millimeter, 50 millimeter, so on and so forth, bell of your scope. And you can certainly put whatever kind of scope you want to on here. This can certainly be adapted to using a scout scope if you want to mount it forward of the receiver still. You can certainly use it for mounting a standard scope or a red dot or whatever you want to. But the cool thing about it is you've got some options here. And You certainly have a solid mount. It's not going to move forward or to the sides because of the way that it's conformed to the receiver of your unique rifle. And that's why the band comes in an unbended form, so it can form to your actual rifle. So for a no drill, no tap mount, the installation was pretty quick and easy and clean. It took me a little while to get used to bending the metal and making this part happen here, but again, I just cannot say enough about this. Definitely check out a Jmeck mount. Again, this is a low profile aluminum. You can do high profile or low profile in the size heights, or you can go aluminum or steel. So you have really 4 choice configurations there. And Jmeck also has a side mount. He has some mounts for other guns as well. Check out his website, which I'm going to give you at the bottom of the screen. And I'm very, very, very happy with this. I cannot say enough about it. In fact, I'm thrilled at the outcome of this. I've been waiting and waiting and waiting for a product like this to come along, and now that it finally has, I am blown away. So absolutely incredible mount. Check out Jmeck scope mounts and absolutely have a blast with these, because I do not see myself mounting another type of receiver mount on my gun in the future. Thank you so much again for watching us. Feel free to check out my website at dustinsprojects.com, as well as my YouTube channel for some other videos for the Mosin Nagant. Thanks a lot for joining me with this journey of installing this awesome new scope mount. And I can't say enough about Jmeck. What an awesome, awesome product.
Life's a pretty hard lesson if you're gonna